So UMSL as a case study. What you see here is back in 2004, 2005, those were the earliest years that Chancellor George, who's in his 15th year, by the way, following 7 years as a chancellor at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Marvelous man, I'm privileged to work with him. This is what was being raised. And they launched a campaign, and in launching the campaign, there was an investment made that was through shared governance, a reallocation of funds. And they brought on someone like myself, a very competent fundraiser and leader. And for the next 3 years, more than doubled. I arrived in 2009, and we have been running. And we've raised $236.5 million through last fiscal year. I think we may have a record year. Our previous record year was 31,250. Fingers crossed. I may talk about this latest opportunity with you in a minute, but I think we might blow that out of the waters here by the end of June. It means a lot to me because June 30th I retire. Okay, so back please. I want to stick with that a little bit longer. There we go. So it's a 375% increase, the kind of increase you want. But the challenge is maintaining it. So what we've been able to do is over a long period of time maintain $26.5 million, and you can see it's not exactly flat. There's some highs and lows, but fairly consistent. And we've been able to do that at UMSL, and you need to do the opposite, but with a 25% reduction of staff. Over my 10 years, we used to say we had one tradition at UMSL, annual budget cuts. And recently, we've begun to reallocate into some critical areas and invest in new areas, which are very exciting. In all the budget cutting, one thing I worked very hard at was preserving our fundraising core, which is 12 to 14 folks that engage with people outside of their offices. And that's a small group for the size of our university, but it probably sounds like a pretty big group for all of you. But that's something we've worked hard at. And fortunately, you mentioned technology. Technology helped us to shrink without losing a whole lot of punch. But nevertheless, it's been turbulent waters for the University of Missouri St. Louis. Sir?
Has that increase in fundraising been from the corporate side or from the alumni side?
That's an excellent question, and I'm going to address that a little bit further along, if you want to hold on. And if I miss it, say, hey, you promised me something.
I will.
Okay. Good. So how did we do this? When I arrived in August of '08, which was for fiscal year 2009, of course, I was incredibly excited. I'd been at St. Louis University as an associate vice president for university development. I called those 3 years dog years. I learned so much. They were like 7 years squeezed into every one, 21 years worth of experience. So when I got to UMSL, I felt I was ready to rock and roll. And 30 days or 40 days in, what happened? The Great Recession landed with a phenomenal thud. The Great Thud, the Great Recession. And we had to talk about that. We had to consider what to do about that. We pressed on. And we pressed on with a theme I called the relentless pursuit of major gifts. Okay, relentless. It has to be ongoing, it has to be a priority, it has to be a continual focus. And major gifts, while every gift matters, major gifts move the needle quicker. And there has got to be a focus on doing so. We relied on a couple of, several significant things. One was great volunteer campaign leadership. We had volunteers who set up calls for our chancellor and for myself that provided testimonials that were very, very powerful. And many of them were associated with foundations and corporations, by the way, that came to our support. We had what we called, before I arrived, the August Chateau Society. And that was a society that recognized, in a special way, those who made lifetime commitments of $100,000 or more. So we had that to work with. And we used gift announcements very adroitly, which I'll describe in a moment. So you don't get a trajectory like that by luck. You do that by very, very hard work, being relentless, absolutely persevering over time. I mentioned gift announcements. So you may remember when Anheuser-Busch was acquired. And here in St. Louis, and maybe you felt it in your own work, there was just incredible angst about losing such a huge philanthropic business. And there was terrific concern about whether they would continue to give at the levels they had. And unfortunately, as it's turned out, that has been largely turned off. Cost cutting, I guess they might call that. But it's really impacted, particularly years ago, the university. So anyway, one of the last acts of the gift committee of Anheuser-Busch was to direct $2.5 million to UMSL. But because the purchase was imminent, they embargoed it, tabled it, couldn't be discussed. But what we did is through back channels, we worked with their communication people that when the right time would be, when they would feel comfortable, that we could announce that together. And sure enough, at that time, President Peacock was in charge, and about 6 months later, I think it was February of that year, we had this announcement on our campus at 10 in the morning. And it went worldwide instantaneously. It was covered by all the networks. And it was broadcasted and rebroadcasted, and the sentence said, the cover sentence said, Anheuser-Busch, UMSL, $2.5 million. Fantastic moment for our university. We had something similar, not to put pressure on our president here, but when Chancellor George and his wife Barbara made a commitment of more than $1 million, almost $2 million, let's just say that got some attention in St. Louis too. You know, using gift announcements, again, this is that whole idea of elevating the brand, elevating the value proposition of your university. Major gifts can do that for you.